This is what I wanted to see. The Gross Mismanagement of Bungie by Basic or Bisic. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Sorry if I mispronounced his name or so. But this video was uploaded like at least one day ago, at least the recording of this video. So I'd be curious to see if he has more information of how mismanaged Bungie is, question mark. Hey Pan, how you been?
Before this video begins, I want to make something very clear. I hate rage bait content. I never want to post a video on my channel for the sole purpose of getting clicks through negative emotions. With today's topic being about Bungie, I want to make clear that I'm not some random person who's never played a Bungie game before commenting about its current state. I have close to 4,000 hours on Destiny 2 between console and PC. My first editing job on YouTube was actually because of Destiny 2. In a twisted way, I have Bungie and Destiny 2 to thank for this channel, as I probably never would have gotten this far without that experience. With that being said though, I mentioned in my looter shooter video that Destiny 2 has literally never been in a worse state than it is right now. That's not hyperbole, that's not clickbait. That is the reality of the situation. I know Steam charts have been a hot topic recently, but it's still one of the better ways we have to look at trends. And yeah, this is bad, like really, really bad. So in today's video, I want to take a look at Bungie in its entirety, from its inception to the booming popularity of Halo and Destiny, and finally where everything seemingly went wrong. And if you allow me to be a YouTuber for just a second, more than 98% of you aren't subscribed. So if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more like it, the best way to do that is by subscribing. Without further ado, let's get into it, and we should probably first establish who Bungie even is.
The origins of Bungie.
The history of Bungie starts all the way back in 1991, founded in Chicago by Alex Soropian.
Oh, 1991. Oh, those were some good times.
And Jason Jones. Uniquely at first, Bungie primarily developed Mac exclusive titles, which made them quite an outlier for this time period. The first game developed and published by the pair was Minotaur: The Labyrinth of Crete, released in 1992, a top-down CRPG that was actually the first multiplayer-only game released on Mac, supporting up to 7 players. After its success, the plan was to make a sequel, but this time in 3D. This, however, transitioned into an entirely different game altogether, Pathways into Darkness. This was released in 1993 and was a first-person shooter RPG with survival horror elements. Much of the game consisted of shooting, but also relied heavily on difficult puzzle solving. Pathways into Darkness was the first commercial success for Bungie.
From 1991 are probably not there anymore, to be frankly honest. I bet you it's just new people.
Going on to win Inside Mac Games Adventure Game of the Year and Macworld's Best Role-Playing Game. The success of Pathways allowed Bungie to expand, moving into an actual office building rather than one-bedroom apartment, and hiring their first full-time employee in 1994. Much like between Minotaur and Pathways, Bungie planned on releasing a sequel to Pathways with their next game, but like before, this would not be the case, and turned into a brand new FPS called Marathon. Initially showcased to the public January of 1994, it was a clear step up in almost every way from the studio.
Holy cow! Jeff Keighley, dude. Oh my god, dude. Old Jeff Keighley from Spike TV? Oh my bro, Spike TV is a throwback and a half, to be honest. God damn, dude. That is a name I haven't heard in forever.
Every way from the studio's last FPS release. However, in spite of this, it failed to generate any meaningful buzz, causing Bungie to completely rewrite the game's rendering engine as well as writing a new plotline. The original Marathon would release December 21st, 1994, and it was a massive commercial and critical success for Bungie. This cemented the studio as the leading developers for Mac, and even brought attention to the platform outside of the Mac gaming market. At face value, Marathon's gameplay at the time was very similar to other FPS titles, killing enemies while progressing through tight corridors. However, it differed quite a bit in terms of storytelling, as well as featuring non-linear progression to a certain extent. Marathon didn't have cutscenes to deliver its story, relying on in-game terminals scattered throughout each level, many of which weren't actually needed to progress, meaning if players wanted more information, they would have to go out, find more terminals. The levels in Marathon were also unique for the time. While some were straightforward, kill enemies and get to the end, most levels featured other objectives like puzzles or finding a specific switch to progress. With the immense success of the original, Bungie would go on to release 2 more follow-ups to Marathon from 1995 to 1996, Marathon 2 Durandal, which was ported to Windows 95, causing a bit of a stir in the Mac gaming community at the time, then Marathon Infinity, the last title released in the trilogy. From 1997 to 2001, Bungie would release a multitude of titles from the Myth series, consisting of Myth: The Fallen Lords and Myth 2 Soulbringer, and also Oni, which was developed by Bungie West, a subdivision of Bungie at the time. This was the first and only game developed by Bungie West. Myth 2 was
what? They made an anime game? I never even knew they made an anime game.
released in 1998 and was by many accounts everything good about the first title but better. Another commercial and critical success for Bungie that gave the fairly new game studio a stellar reputation. This however came at quite the cost financially, as an extremely destructive bug was found in the game after it had been released, which could effectively delete someone's entire hard drive. Because of this, Bungie made the decision to recall about 200,000 copies of Myth 2 CDs and replace them with an updated 1.1 version. All in all, costing Bungie around $800,000, which adjusted today would be around 1.6 million. Remember, at this time, Bungie was an independent studio, meaning this was a massive financial blow. With financial problems ensuing, this caused Bungie to make a decision that would not only change the course of Bungie's future, but the entirety of gaming as a whole.
Chapter 2, the Halo era.
June 19th, 2000, Microsoft would announce its acquisition of Bungie. This was done in part due to the financial struggles of Bungie at the time, but also because Microsoft was searching for first-party titles to release alongside the Xbox console. Halo initially began development while Bungie was making Myth 2, and known only as a side project codenamed Blam. Since the Myth series had put Bungie on the map, Blam was being developed as a successor to Myth, but set in the far future. This would slowly begin to change, however, into a third-person shooter, and was originally developed for Mac and Windows prior to the Microsoft acquisition. The third-person camera would last for quite a while, with an E3 2000 demo for Halo even being shown with this perspective. This would change after the Microsoft purchase, and the team would overhaul many aspects of the game, most importantly shifting to a first-person shooter. The build-up to Halo's release was quite a hectic time for Bungie behind the scenes, adding many new features to leverage the power of the Xbox console, but also needing to cut content as well. Something that almost didn't make the release of the game was the multiplayer, as that was cut and completely rebuilt behind the scenes by remnants of Bungie West only 4 months before the game's release. The 33 cutscenes in the game were finished on September 9th, 2001, leaving only about 3 days for Marty O'Donnell, the lead composer, and Jay Weenland to add the iconic music as well as sounds. Halo Combat Evolved would finally release on November 15th, 2001 for Xbox. This met universal praise from players and critics alike, revolutionizing FPS games on console and receiving numerous Game of the Year award nominations. For the next almost decade, Bungie would release multiple Halo titles under Microsoft, with Halo 2 releasing in 2004 and Halo 3 releasing in 2007. The making of Halo 3 wasn't exactly smooth sailing, to say the least. Jason Jones was on sabbatical, and Pete Parsons, the then Microsoft executive, didn't assign a lead for the project, which, as you can imagine, led to infighting. Now, I wanted to bring this up because Pete Parsons is a very important person for Bungie's story overall, though his impact won't be felt until much later on. It's around this time in 2007 that Bungie and Microsoft would come to an agreement that would allow Bungie to once again become independent. Announced in October of 2007, Bungie was set to officially become an independently held company, but there was a caveat. As part of this agreement, Bungie would need to release 3 more Halo titles under Microsoft before their departure. The first of these 3 titles was Halo 3, which released a month before this announcement, with Halo 3 ODST following in 2009, and finally Halo Reach in 2010, the last Bungie developed Halo title. After the split, Microsoft would retain the rights to the Halo IP and form their own Studio 343, which was renamed to Halo Studios as of today. Bungie, however, had
which is not really a good studio, to be honest, for the Halo, because their Halo games have not been very great. At least is what I've been hearing.
Their sight set on what was next. As early as 2007, Bungie was working on a project that was known internally as codename Tiger. Even before the departure, Bungie was determined to start a brand new IP outside of Halo, focusing more on fantasy with knights, swords, and sorcery. However, due to many of their staff initially joining to work on Halo, they made the decision to merge.
Dude, these fucking concept arts are so cool. What the fuck, dude? Man, that is such a shame how much like some of the concept art just doesn't come into the final part of the game or so. Dude, some of these look so good.
The genres, and what we ended up with was Destiny.
The Destiny era.
April 29th, 2010, Bungie and Activision announced they were entering into a 10-year publishing deal. This would see Bungie retain.
When I heard when this actually happened or so with Activision and Bungie, I was like, man, Bungie is so screwed, to be honest. I didn't like it personally.
Ownership of their next IP, but allow Activision to hold publishing rights on all games created within that franchise. Bungie would officially announce Destiny February 11th, 2013 via the Pathways Out of Darkness Vidoc. This was a 4-minute video that introduced the world to Destiny, showing off tons of concept art and even very early remnants of some in-game menus. Fast forward to E3 2013, we would get a trailer for Destiny, followed shortly by a gameplay demo showcasing very early footage of the Cosmodrome, which is the starting area of the game. Now, we didn't know it at the time, but Destiny was was originally planned to release in September of 2013. This, however, would change after Bungie leadership demanded the story and narrative be changed, saying the original was too campy and linear. Because of this, massive sections of the story were either redone or removed entirely, causing the game to be pushed back to March 2014. Then in June 2014 at E3, we would get the official release date of September 9th, 2014. Destiny's release saw it receive very mixed reviews at launch, with many citing the narrative as a point of contention. Knowing what we know now, it really isn't a surprise. This being the next game from the studio behind the legendary Halo franchise didn't help it at all either. The story was extremely disjointed. It made little to no sense after a first-time playthrough.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
This was even more disappointing because Bungie had tons of lore about the Destiny universe for players to learn about, just not in the game itself. Instead being relegated to grimoire cards, which were essentially text excerpts that at the time could only be accessed online and not in-game. Anyone who took the time to read these could clearly see the immense storytelling potential that was here, making the lackluster main campaign hurt even more. While Destiny's campaign was middling to say the least, one thing that has always been undeniable about Bungie games was the great gunplay. This, alongside the Vault of Glass raid that would release only 1 week following launch, would get many eyes on Destiny. At the time, Destiny was also very unique as it was a looter shooter, but also had many MMO elements within it, something that we really hadn't seen at the time, especially not on a console. 3 months later, on December 9th, The Dark Below would release Destiny's first expansion, bringing alongside it new content, but more importantly, a new raid, Crota's End. Then, May 19th, 2015, the infamous House of Wolves expansion would be released. I say infamous because this expansion brought with it the Trials of Osiris game mode, a 3v3 PvP mode available only from Friday to Tuesday that had exclusive gear. For Destiny 1, Trials was an enormous success, seeing people with no prior interest in Destiny checking the game out because of it. This is something that will be important to remember, so bookmark it for now. Following this, on September 15th, the Taken King expansion would release, and this was
good DLC. The Taken King was a very fun DLC. I love that DLC.
Massive. Bungie overhauled many systems in the game, as well as adding tons of new loot and new subclasses. The Taken King was released in 2015, and Bungie's next title, Destiny 2, was reportedly planned for a 2016 release date. This, however, would change due to Destiny 2 being rebooted, according to reports, as well as a staff reorganization. This saw a new game director assigned to Destiny 2, Luke Smith, who was the director for the immensely popular Taken King expansion. Because of this, Bungie would release a fourth and final expansion for Destiny 1, Rise of Iron, on September 20th, 2016. A well-received expansion in its own right that brought a fan-favorite raid, Wrath of the Machine, as well as the introduction to Siva, a new power wielded by enemies that Destiny fans to this day still want Bungie to do more with. Earlier in 2016, however, on January 27th, Bungie announced that Pete Parsons was anointed as CEO of the company. This is another bookmark in our story, as this decision alone was perhaps the most important event in Bungie's history outside of the Microsoft acquisition all those years ago. However, like most things, we wouldn't know this at the time.
Chapter 4, Destiny 2.
The much anticipated Destiny 2 would release on September 6, 2017 for Xbox and PlayStation. Then
I saw this trailer, but I never played Destiny 2. Never played it. I don't even remember what I was playing during when this game came out.
Month later, on October 24th for PC. Much like the original, Destiny 2's launch left much to be desired. Perhaps even more so, as many of the design decisions at the time were just downright head-scratching, and unfortunately the next year of content would do little to actually change this. On December 5th, the first expansion for Destiny 2 would be released, Curse of Osiris. This is regarded by most people in the community as the single worst piece of content ever released between Destiny 1 and 2.
Really? It was the worst piece of content ever released? Maybe it was initially part of the game, and then they probably did the same tactic or so what they did in Destiny 1, because the House of Wolves or so felt like the DLC should have been part of the game instead of it being its own thing, because it didn't really feel very, I don't know, very complete or so, or it just felt kind of awkward.
Into the fact that the DLC was very small and felt rushed, while also completely ignoring the problems with the core of Destiny 2 at the time. Perhaps making it worse is that many look back at Destiny 1's launch and subsequent first expansion and saw many of the same problems plaguing the sequel, leading many to believe that Bungie just hadn't learned from past missteps. Curse of Osiris was such a low point in the game's lifespan that many still use it as a point of reference when comparing other less than optimal releases. On May 8th, 2018, we would get the Warmind expansion, but more importantly, in June, June, news would break that NetEase invested over $100 million into Bungie, which gained them a minority stake in the company and a seat on its board of directors. For those that don't know, NetEase is a Chinese gaming giant, and many didn't really know what to expect from this at the time. CEO P. Parsons would comment on the partnership, saying, "Really what this partnership is about is bringing the expertise NetEase has, sharing ideas, and allowing us to incubate new ideas."
I played the OG launch of Destiny 2. It was bad. And remember, they stole the story from someone else. You can no longer play the OG launch story. I wish you could still. I would totally love to play the original story, just because, you know, I just wanted to see how that is. Who knows? Maybe there is a copy out there with the original story.
A truly interesting choice of words indeed. On September 4th, 2018, the Forsaken expansion would release, and no exaggeration, this saved Destiny 2. This, much like the Taken King expansion for Destiny 1, overhauled major systems in the game that were a pain point for many, on top of adding easily the most content to the game we have ever seen even to this date. Despite the immense popularity, however, according to Activision, this did not meet expectations in terms of revenue, saying in an earnings call that Forsaken did not live up to Activision's expectations, even promising investors a faster content model and new forms of monetization for the game. Mind you, this was in stark contrast to player sentiment at the time, as many viewed and still view Forsaken as the best DLC release for Destiny, period, as it literally brought the game back from the brink and got players interested again, which is certainly not an easy task. In response to the comments from Activision, game director Luke Smith took to Twitter to say, "We are not disappointed with Forsaken. We set out to build a game that Destiny players would love, and at Bungie, we love it too. Building Destiny for players who love it is and will remain our focus going forward." After this, on January 10th, 2019, Bungie announced the end to their partnership with Activision. Bungie retained all the rights to Destiny and also received the publishing rights from Activision. At the time, the community almost unanimously rallied around Bungie, with many believing that this was a step in the right direction for the company as a whole and would allow them to push out more content for the players rather than needing to appease the higher-ups. While that may have been true at the time, the gravity of what was lost was certainly something many seemed to sweep under the rug. One of the biggest assets of Activision support was the help from High Moon Studios and Vicarious Visions, who both aided in the development of content for Destiny 2. This itself was a pretty hefty loss, but one Bungie was prepared to face head on, and for at least a while, it seemed they were doing alright. In late 2018 to 2019, Destiny 2 also shifted towards seasonal models, basically releasing free—
Wait, you mean not meeting sales targets? I know people be spending on $100 on the edition for each expansion. Well, remember, right? These people like to have the most highest fucking expectations as much as possible, and they don't, you know, even though the game did pretty fantastically well, they didn't meet the criteria, you know. After they released their seasonal changing shit from Fortnite, instead of making Destiny 3 the darkness swallowed Titan, thus removing content from the base story, they scrapped
seasons
it
every 3 or 4 months in conjunction with a major expansion each year, with the first ones being Season of Forge in 2018, then Season of the Drifter and Opulence in 2019, with the next major expansion Shadowkeep releasing on October 1st alongside Season of the Undying. Nothing super noteworthy would happen with Destiny 2 in 2019 to mid to late 2020, when in June Bungie would announce the Destiny Content Vault. This was pitched as a way for Bungie to keep updating Destiny 2 since it had grown exceptionally large. But what this meant was that Bungie would be removing older content from the game. The biggest problem with this was that most, if not all of the content was paid content. Multiple expansions, seasons, and even the game's base story, which mind you, at this time Destiny had already gone free to play, but that wasn't the case in 2017 when it was full price $60. All in all, this was going to remove 8 strikes, 11 Crucible or PvP maps, 7 Crucible modes, 5 raids/raid layers, 16 exotic weapon quests, and 5 planets or locations. Again, this was content and campaigns people paid for that were just outright being removed from the game. As to be expected—
Dude, I'd be so pissed if they removed that shit. Oh, hell no, dude. If I was playing this game during that time, I'd be crashing out on fucking Bungie so hard, dude.
Almost no one liked this idea, not even for the fact that old content was being removed, because in reality, most people weren't engaging with it anyway, but it seemed like this was the first step in studios removing content that players paid for. What's worse is that this totally killed any semblance of a new player experience in the game. Now you're just thrown into the game with no way of actually witnessing past stories outside of watching a YouTube video. This was all set to go into effect when the next major expansion, Beyond Light, would release on November 10th, 2020. Alongside this, Bungie implemented another highly controversial system system into the game, sunsetting. This aimed to essentially add a
Sunsetting?
lifespan on loot acquired, meaning after a certain expansion you would no longer be able to level that gear up to the max level. Another change that pissed off majority of the player base. This, in conjunction with the Destiny content vault, led to Beyond Light receiving middling reviews overall. While the expansion was fine, the Stasis subclass genuinely made PvP almost unplayable for months. And if it wasn't bad enough that Bungie was removing or sunsetting all this content from the game, Beyond Light barely added anything back. So you had a situation where almost 50% of the game was vaulted and maybe 5 to 10% was added in the form of new content, and that's probably
crazy.
being generous. In July of 2021, Bungie celebrated its 30th anniversary. Later in that same year, in December, Bungie would release the 30th anniversary pack for Destiny 2, which was a celebration of the milestone featuring nods to old titles. However, following this, IGN would release an article that detailed the accounts of 26 current and former employees at Bungie that painted the studio in a not so positive light. The context here is that in September, CEO Pete Parsons put out a statement discussing Bungie's desire to push back against toxic work culture. While many in the industry viewed this as a great thing, others within the company viewed this as too little too late or hypocritical, as it didn't align with the current culture at Bungie. If you want to read more about this, as always, the links to anything I
That's
referenced are
interesting.
listed down below. After this, however, things would go on as usual for Bungie and Destiny 2 for about a month. This was until January 31st, 2022 that another future-altering move would happen at Bungie. Sony would purchase Bungie for $3.6 billion in 2022, which was quite the shock at the time. More importantly for Bungie, Sony made it very clear that they would remain an independent multi-platform studio and publisher. The acquisition at the time left many surprised at the eye-watering amount Sony paid for what was essentially just Destiny 2. However, Sony clearly had bigger plans for Bungie outside of just Destiny. Sony executive Hiroki Totoki would go on to say, "The strategic significance of this acquisition lies not only in obtaining the highly successful Destiny franchise, as well as a major new IP Bungie is currently developing, but also incorporating
Marathon. It was Marathon.
to the Sony group the expertise and technologies Bungie has developed in the live service space." At this time, Destiny was a major live service success that many other companies tried to replicate with new releases. If you want to hear more about that, by the way, check out this video. So Sony was not only buying Destiny and what would later go on to be Marathon, but also having
I still feel like it's such a bad. I think Sony definitely made a bad call on this one, in my personal opinion. Granted, they couldn't tell the future, right? But it's like, I don't know if I would spend that much money or so on Destiny for one single IP. I don't know, man.
Bungie around to guide other first-party studios in making live service games. We know more about this now due in part to all the cancellations behind the scenes at Sony after Bungie's acquisition, but also after the monumental flop of Concord. For example, fast forwarding to 2025, and the news came out about Naughty Dog's planned Last of Us live service game that was canceled. This was due in part to Bungie's intervention, explaining to the team what it would take to run a live service offering, ultimately causing Sony and Naughty Dog to come to the decision to scrap the game. Back to 2022, the
Wait, really? That's the reason why the Naughty Dog one was canceled? Huh, interesting. But you might have allegedly sabotaged Naughty Dog's online game because it was also an extraction game, is what I've heard. Really? Interesting.
Between expansion would release on February 22nd and was positively received by the fanbase. Around this time though, and throughout the year, it seemed that some in the community were being as toxic as ever. Don't get me wrong, every gaming community has some out-of-line people, and Destiny is certainly no different, but the specific scenario started with something so stupid and just kept getting worse. Essentially what happened was Kevin Yanis, a sandbox discipline lead at Bungie, said on Twitter that a fan-favorite exotic from Destiny 1, Twilight Garrison, would not be coming back to Destiny 2. This, for whatever reason, made people lose their minds and send death threats and harass Giannis
That's
to the
pretty
point where he
crazy.
scrubbed his account of any Bungie mention. This toxicity towards Bungie would carry forward to the next expansion as well, Lightfall. Released on February 28th, 2023, Bungie would also release a developer insight video alongside it. This also saw many comments being hostile towards Bungie and the developers, leading to the comment section for the video being disabled. Now, Lightfall itself was a pretty big letdown for many. Although the new Strand subclass was a fun new addition to the game, the narrative for Lightfall is one of the worst worst the series has seen since Destiny 1 Vanilla. Despite this, Lightfall sold well with an estimated 2.2 million lifetime pre-orders and reaching an all-time peak concurrent player count on Steam of 316,000 players, the highest still to this day. But due to the poor reception, this number would drop rapidly down to 87,000 players in just the first few weeks. Not record low numbers by any stretch, but still a very sharp decline for an expansion that had many people excited for the future of Destiny. In May of that year, Bungie would officially announce Marathon, a reboot of the classic from the 90s that was set to be an extraction shooter. This reveal trailer garnered a lot of buzz, reaching 22 million views as of today. After this though, any mention of Marathon would almost completely cease, and shortly thereafter we would find out why. October 30th, 2023, Bungie employees were seen posting online that they had been laid off, and this was not a small amount either. This was also not something that the employees were made aware of until the moment it happened, and all in all, 100 people or 8% of the staff were let go. Things got even worse when CEO P. Parsons took to Twitter to tweet this. As you can imagine, people were not happy about this, considering the man responsible for these layoffs was tweeting just a few hours after this news broke. The reasoning for the layoffs was cited as Destiny 2's decline in performance for the year. Despite Lightfall selling well, it apparently missed revenue milestones set by Bungie by around 45%, leaving many confused as to what Bungie was even expecting, considering the game had more people playing it than it ever had before. This unfortunately would start a trend where employees would be laid off for reasons that were out of their control, being fired for reasons that their department had no control over, or more importantly, decisions made from higher-ups, a point we'll get more to later. Due to these layoffs, the final shape, Destiny 2's next big expansion, was delayed all the way from February 2024 to June 2024, a substantial 4-month delay. It was also reported that Marathon would be pushed back all the way to 2025, even though the game had been in development since 2019. This is the point where essentially shit hit the fan, and over the next year or so, more and more news would come to light, showing just how much of a mess Bungie internally had become.
Chapter 7. Incubation.
Okay, so we're going to begin jumping around a bit here as there's a lot to cover and the timeline is a bit all over the place, but just stay with me. As I mentioned with the last round of layoffs, we know that Bungie was actively working on 2 games, Destiny 2 and its DLC, and Marathon, an extraction shooter. However, there was a third game called Matter. Little to nothing is known about this game as it never really expanded past pre-development phases. However, around this time, we got some new information from an unlikely source about the internals of Bungie at the time. Aztecross, a very...
Bro, Aztec Cross. Those concept art looks really nice and everything. I'm not gonna lie. Like, honestly, like, it looks really great. At least the concept art.
Popular Destiny creator and streamer put out a now deleted video and list of tweets explaining the relationship between Marathon, Destiny, and also some news about Matter. He went on to say that Matter was actually cancelled in 2020, which could actually be true because IGN reported that the team continued to iterate on it until 2022 when that version of the game was also cancelled. More interestingly, insight was given as to who is actually working on Marathon, saying that many developers who were burnt out on Destiny 2, like Tyson Green, who had been with Bungie since Halo, and Kevin Yan, who we mentioned earlier. It was also said that Marathon started as a battle royale, considering how popular they were at the time.
Oh my god, of course it was going to be a battle royale to begin with. So this was the original DNA. It was a battle royale
Of its inception, but this was changed to an extraction shooter once Bungie saw the success of Escape from Tarkov.
These companies never learn. They just like trend chasing, man. They really do. They love that trend chasing.
There is some credence to this, as Bungie earlier that year hosted a private playtest for Marathon with primarily Escape from Tarkov players, which apparently went very poorly. Part of the reason...
Well, no shit, Sherlock. You... Okay, alright.
And the game was further delayed to 2025. Another interesting point that was brought up was the fact that no Destiny PvP players were invited to test a new Bungie title, considering you would think Bungie would...
How ironic that is, huh? Your core fan base is a Destiny player base, but you don't bring any of them over to play your new game. Huh. Kind of weird in my personal opinion. It's like you're basically leaving your fan base behind for chasing another fan base. It's like leaving your girlfriend for your ex. And your ex was Marathon.
would want people familiar with their games testing a new one. This is even stranger because at this point in time, Destiny 2 PvP was and still is on life support, with 0 updates to the game mode outside of balancing changes. There was a literal stretch of time where 0 new maps were added for almost 2 or 3 years. Editing me here, I can't find a concrete definitive number of days, but just know it was an extremely long time. And remember, like I mentioned earlier, Trials of Osiris was an immensely popular game mode for Destiny 1, and the same thing could be said for Destiny 2. But at this time, the PvP playlist saw little to no updates, and that included Trials of Osiris as well. And I know many Destiny 2 players still hate PvP and never even considered playing it in the first place. It's undeniable that PvP is one of the most unique things about Destiny. But for Bungie at the time, and still to this day, it's pretty clear that PvP is a complete afterthought when it comes to Destiny 2, which I guess makes more sense now since all PvP focus was shifted away from Destiny 2 towards Marathon. This would also be a very early start of Destiny 2 players' vitriol for Marathon, as more and more information would come out about Marathon while Destiny 2 was seemingly hanging on by a thread. Also, this is all just speculation and hearsay from a creator, so take it with a grain of salt, but many of these things turned out to be true. And knowing Aztecross, he wouldn't ever delete something for no reason, so take that for what you will. March 21st, 2024, we would get an announcement from Bungie that Joe Ziegler, former game director for Valorant, was now the lead on Marathon. In fact, he had been for about
Hey everyone, fun update. For the last 9 months, I've been working on Marathon as a game director. They're still baking, but I'm excited to share with you more info on the game as we get closer and closer to bringing it all for you, all of you. What? They brought a person from Valorant?
about 9 months up to that point, replacing former lead Christopher Barrett, another Bungie veteran. At this time, the reason for this was unknown, but it would eventually come out that Christopher Barrett was being let go by Bungie due to harassment complaints against him from employees. When the shakeup was announced, it was also reported that Bungie was pouring resources into Marathon to get it out the door, likely due to some Sony pressure, and Destiny 2 wasn't exactly paying for that $3.6 billion payout. On June 4th, 2024, Destiny 2 The Final Shape would release, the conclusion to the Light and Darkness saga. This expansion is considered as one of, if not the best releases for Destiny, period, including myself, by the way. From the narrative to the content to the weapons and the raid, everything was stellar. It seemed like Destiny and Bungie had finally righted the ship, and Sony were going to reap the rewards from their prior investment. Unfortunately though, this is Bungie we're talking about, and very quickly things would turn for the worse. July 31st, a little under 2 months since the booming success of The Final Shape, Bungie would lay off 220 workers, roughly 18% of its workforce. This was announced in a blog post by CEO Pete Parsons, who cited ambition getting the better of them, explaining that Bungie spread themselves too thin with a number of incubation projects, which ultimately led to this decision. This also meant Bungie was being integrated more into Sony, with 155 roles being moved from Bungie to Sony as well, with one incubation project being saved and shifted over to Sony. As you can imagine, this caused mass outrage from the community, but also current and former employees as well, many calling for Pete to retire or just calling him a joke, all things that Parsons couldn't see because he conveniently privated his account before the announcement. This was now in total 320 people let go in a year, highlighting just how poor Bungie management has been for the years leading up. To throw salt in the wound, people were quick to find out that Parsons had spent almost $3 million on his classic car collection in those 2 years.
Yeah, I remember this. Pete Parsons seems to have spent $2.4 million on 25 cars in the last 2 years. You know, you could have used that money towards, you know, your studio, in my personal opinion. Hey, man, I remember someone who took a cut pay or so from their paycheck or so they can keep their employees in their, you know, in their specific household or so they don't have to, you know, lay them off, you know? Maybe you should probably learn a lesson or two from that, you know?
Also laying off his staff, taking little to no accountability for those missteps. We also learned after this that Bungie was betting hard on yet another incubation project referred to as Payback. This was being led by former Destiny 2 lead Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy, another Bungie vet.
Oh my fucking god, they're making so many incubation projects. What are you guys doing over there? What is happening?
This was a big departure from Destiny 2 and was set to be a third-person game where the players would explore an open world and was compared to Warframe as well as Genshin Impact, but this was cancelled to
Genshin Impact and Warframe. What a combination to see that, to be honest. But 2 months ago, Bungie canceled Payback to prioritize games that were more imminent moving the bulk of its team to Marathon, which is targeting. What is dude? The management in this goddamn company is absurd. To be honest, I cannot believe what I'm hearing right now.
Focus on Destiny 2 and Marathon, and as a result, both Smith and Noseworthy would leave Bungie. This was also after Joe Blackburn, longtime director for D2, would leave in January 2024, right before the final shape would release in June. Since this point, Bungie, and especially Destiny 2,
they pretty much lost almost all of the old veterans that were there since the Halo days. They definitely have. Yeah, because Sony is any better. Sony also owns Crunchyroll, and then see what happens when they're with their league.
Never recovered.
Yeah, that, yeah.
Again, that's not hyperbole. That is just the reality of the situation. Destiny 2 has gone on to get semi-regular content updates since then, but these have been much smaller in scale and has done little to nothing to drive player engagement, with its most recent major update being pushed back 3 months and player numbers across all platforms at an all-time low. Destiny 2 is in a very bad spot currently. Marathon, on the other hand, was finally released in March of this year. After a very brutal development process that saw yet another art theft scandal, not the first time that this has happened at Bungie, it's actually been pretty well reviewed.
See, my point of it matters more who is at the top? No, it's because it's California. That's the reason why. They're doing incubation codes when they get into the market. No, it's because the problem is, for some apparent reason, right? They start on a project, right? But then they cancel it. They like immediately cancel it. That's the thing itself. Like they just like they pour resources into these things. Number one, that's a waste of money to begin with, and number two, it's like what are you doing at this point? You know, you're making so many multiple incubation projects. You're just burning money at this point. Like straight up, you're just you might as well just set the money on fire in front of you at that point. You know.
Though this is a far cry from the rousing success Bungie needed and Sony expected. We have some estimates courtesy of Alinea Analytics, a trusted source when it comes to revenue estimates, and the numbers don't look great, with Marathon estimated to have sold around 1.2 million copies as of March 24th. For comparison, Arc Raiders sold 14 million units in 4 months, while Helldivers 2, another Sony live service,
get better leaders for the games for Cali, damn it. Dude, the problem is like, so why the reason why I say specifically of that, right? It's because number one is that mentality to begin with, and then number two, it's just honestly, when you hire these kinds of specific people, right? They already have this specific mentality of money all the time. Right, because maybe these big business guys or so, right, that has oodles of cash or so that invest on that invest on these gamers and everything like that, probably come from a certain background or so where, you know, if a project fails, you know, you just shut it down, you know, immediately. I don't know, man. I just feel like it's just that California mentality, specifically when it comes to this. Nah, Cali is compromised. Best blow up the faculties and let CA sink in the ocean. That is also a good plan.
sold 12 million in 2 weeks, but both of those games had maintained much higher player numbers than Marathon is currently. Now, I haven't played it, and that's not the point here. The point is, Sony was definitely expecting this game to be a smash hit, and it had to be. They're down almost $4 billion at this point invested into Bungie, with little to nothing to show for it. Nothing has been confirmed yet, and I certainly don't want to see content restructures or even more layoffs, but considering history repeats itself, I feel like that's what it's heading towards. Can anything be done? Will anything be done? Will Sony eventually just completely absorb Bungie and make them a first-party studio with little to no autonomy? I have no idea, but if I had to bet, yeah, probably. Yeah. How could they not? The amount invested into Bungie is far too substantial, and they aren't just gonna cut them loose, not at this point. I will mention that in August 2025, it was announced that Pete Parsons was stepping down as CEO of Bungie and passing the torch to Justin Truman. Hopefully it wasn't the torch that was covered in shit. Also, Justin Truman is the guy who had the famous line about not wanting to over-deliver to players, so I'm sure this will go.
Oh, that's the guy that doesn't want to over-deliver and always under-deliver? Oh no, that's it, bro. That's it, bro. That's Bungie is screwed if that's the CEO. Nah, man. I would kiss my ass and go find me another job immediately if I was working under Bungie in the Bungie company. That's all I gotta say. It's not just an LA thing. We also seen it with anime and manga. My point is that the whole West and East thing don't matter because it all takes just one person to bring down the whole ship, in my opinion. But then we find out that that person came from California, though. So I'm still blaming California at the end of the day.
So great. Now, am I hopeful for the future of Bungie? Candidly, no. How could I be? I haven't played Destiny 2 in months, and I have zero plans of ever touching it ever again. Maybe if Bungie announced a Destiny 3 in development, I would check that out, but that would be like 6 years from now, if Bungie were working on one at all. I do think that is the only path forward, though. Not exactly a unique take, as every D2 creator under the sun has said it already, but Destiny 2 is done. There aren't going to be any new players. The player numbers now are steadily falling, and each content drop that happens seems to be smaller and smaller. Before wrapping up, I want to say, if you enjoy playing D2 still, don't let me or anyone else change your mind. That is not my intention in the slightest. I'm just a passionate fan who is done with Destiny as it exists currently. Like I said in the beginning, Destiny holds a very special place in my heart. Truly. I know it sounds corny, but it's the truth. I would not have this YouTube channel if it were.
For me, it also holds a special place in my heart because I met a lot of people, to be honest. I made a lot of good friends. In my personal opinion, it was a good game. The first one, anyways, not the second one. I didn't play the second one.
Weren't for Destiny 2. I probably never would have begun editing professionally either. I look back fondly on my memories with Destiny as a franchise, but that's over. And I think the quicker Bungie comes to terms with that, the better off they will be. But that's pretty much it for me. A much longer video than my usual, but holy shit, there was a lot to talk about. I definitely missed some stuff, so apologies in advance for that. But if you enjoyed, like, comment, sub, all that stuff. Also, if you want to be extra generous for whatever reason, you can become a member on the channel, as that is probably the best way to support. But truly, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Great video, to be frankly honest. That was a good video. No, overall, you know, after seeing that last part specifically of how bad the mismanagement is, I can kind of see why. They thin themselves out so much and they do all these projects, but then like they kind of shut them down almost immediately to work on the ones that they have right now that just came out. Honestly, some of the concept art for at least for that one game or so would have been so nice to see it, but hey, it is what it is at the end of the day, says the New Yorker. Yeah, I am slightly a bit disappointed, I'll be honest with you, the way what they've been doing over there. So, you know, it's justified or so that these people are getting mad at, you know. But honestly, that new guy, that new CEO, yeah, I think definitely, I think people need to let go of Bungie, to be honest, for those people who are like attaching their hope on the company that they'll turn this around. Trust me, you know, it'll be the next one or so. No, I think it's time to let go at this point. You know, you had your fun time or so with Destiny. Don't get me wrong, I had my fun time too, but I think it's time for you to let go. I think it's time for you to find a new game or a new something or so at the end of the day. So I don't think the same people are not there anymore to begin with, and they have this CEO who wants to under-deliver stuff instead of over-delivering. So yeah. And yeah, that's the end of the video. You guys can comment, like, subscribe to all that fancy jazzy stuff. It's time for Destiny fans to let go of the copium. It's over. It's Jover, okay? It's over. Just let it go. Just let it go. The new game is Destiny Classic? No. No. I was saying they need to make a single player game and also put Destiny on a bench. I don't think so, especially with that new CEO that they have. That's the CEO that literally had a conference or so where a video was shown or so, where literally said you should under deliver and never over deliver. That's why. So I think they just need to let go, to be honest. I think it's over. I think it might be over for Bungie. Actually, I would not be surprised in the next couple of years we hear Bungie getting absorbed by Sony, and that is the end of Bungie overall, to be honest. It's time to bring the old yeller. Let's take Bungie out behind the shed. Yep, that's basically is what happened. So, well, that's GG's. That's the end of that. So, anyways, that's the end of the video. And what a very interesting video. Good video, basic. So, I'll be honest, it was really good. So.